You're listening to the Known Legacy Podcast, brought to you by Known Legacy Ministries. For more information, go to knownlegacy.org. Now here's your hosts, Bill and Travis.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, man. I never want to start with something super dynamic because I just feel like somebody will kind of fast forward this part anyway. So
yeah, I guarantee.
But as I was drinking my coffee and it was like a little bit overcast, man. I will say these are the days that life are made for. Like just a good
the
cup
days
of
of our
coffee,
lives, they would say.
like sand through an hourglass. These are the days of our lives.
Man, that's a throwback. There's
Yes,
a
it
whole
is.
host of women who listen to this that are now remembering moments with their mom, and some are watching Days of Our Lives.
My mom watched Guiding Light.
Oh.
And so for a while, I would because there's nothing else on.
Right.
It's the same thing when like when you're just like married and your wife puts a show on and you're like, so she would have these she would VHS record them
Of
and
course.
put them in there. So then after work, she'd watch her show. It's her
Right.
program. And so I was like, oh, this sucks because you have one TV at the house. That's the same time that when the president was on, life was terrible.
Right.
Like you couldn't do anything. So she'd put that on and I'd be like, this sucks. And I like 5 minutes later, I'm like, looking around the corner, like, I wonder what happens to Joyce. You know what I'm saying? Like, she was the uncle's father. You know, all that kind of
Soap
stuff.
operas with Known Legacy. Thank you for listening in today.
Exactly.
Anyways, as always, thank you guys for checking us out, listening to us, or watching us on YouTube. You can always find us at knownlegacy.org. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Bill's doing an amazing job with some little Instagram shorts, words of encouragement.
Thank you.
Our heart is that we would help guys wake up, gear up, and come alive.
Oh, yeah.
So that they could, experience the life fully that God has called them, created them, and forgive them to live, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah,
with
yeah.
summer kind of kicking in, here's my question for us today to process through.
Okay.
Blockbuster movies used to be a thing. I don't know if they are anymore, but the summer blockbuster
I think I
movies.
mean like Blockbuster Video. Like that was, sorry. Okay, anyways, we'll go on.
Blockbuster movies. So my question is, what was the first summer blockbuster movie that you remember going to the theater and like anticipating and having that whole day waiting for that ticket to hit and everything else? Because I remember when I was older, it was Independence Day with Will Smith.
That was a good one.
That was a great one. But the first one I remember is Michael Keaton, OG Batman. And it dropped right at the beginning of summer. And a buddy of mine who was older than me, kind of the same age as my sister, so he was kind of like my pseudo brother. His mom coordinated it, got us both tickets, and we waited in line. We got the popcorn. And I remember watching this show, and it was absolutely fantastic. It was hot outside. You're sweating, just waiting in line. The sun's beating on you. You walk into the theater. It's like set at 68 degrees. You sit, your feet are all sticking to the floors as you're walking in.
Oh, yeah, because no one vacuumed.
No one vacuumed. And you sit on these chairs that are half like broken, and you didn't care because it was summer blockbuster time.
So I can't remember. I don't know if it was summertime or not, but I do remember waiting in line for Braveheart.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember that summer my brother watched it like literally he went like 11 times to the movie to watch it. But I remember that. But I do remember every time we went there was this so you'd get your ticket and sometimes you'd buy either like a day before and you're holding on to that ticket because if you lose it you're gone. There's no like app garbage, you know what I'm saying? Back in my day, we waited in line.
We used paper.
And then you would wait in line to get your ticket. Then you'd wait in line to get in because you were hoping and if anyone had to use the bathroom, you needed to go and get your seat first and then go and get your popcorn or whatever because you just made sure you had the
there
best
weren't
seat.
assigned seats.
No, you needed to.
Back in the
But
day.
I remember that. So that one was big. I want to say I remember going to see Back to the Future 3
What?
in the theater. That was like 90 or 91.
You're so young.
I was like, yeah, but I remember those. They were good. But I remember the Batman movies. I just can't remember racing there on day of because the mall was right near us. So we'd bike down to the mall, lock your bike up, play a couple video games, and then go over to
We
the
lived
theater.
Stranger Things. If you're watching Stranger Things
I know.
with your kids, we actually lived
It was
Stranger
our world.
Things.
It was, and actually you felt pretty safe.
Yes.
Because you're like, I mean, it wasn't that bad. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But I mean, yeah, I remember our mall had a carousel in it. That's how old we were. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
I remember when our mall went under construction. Are we one-upping each other with
I think
our
we
malls?
are. Well, I remember before there were malls, there were just all.
Aladdin's Castle, the old video game, little dive hangout.
Wow, dude. Anyways, sorry. So
Anyways.
we totally rabbit trailed that, but nostalgic. Actually, it's funny. I think I think Stranger Things, like the final season's coming out like in June. So
yeah.
So again, we're back to our old childhood.
I think they're all professionals now. I mean,
I know, yeah.
I mean, it started when they were teenagers.
Millie Bobby Brown's like 47. You know what I'm saying? Shave her head to look like she's 11. Like, what's going on here?
I love it. I love it. Anyways, we do have a special guest today, and we are so excited to have this guy with us. His name is Matt Peeples, and he's a ginger, so a token nod to gingers outweighing the rest of us on the podcast today. Anyways, I'll tell you a little bit about Matt. I met Matt a few years ago, and he was a church planter, I believe, in the Central America, not like South America.
Knoxville, Tennessee.
Knoxville, Tennessee.
In Central America. Better known as the Midwest.
Yeah.
So have you ever had that moment where words come out of your mouth and as they're coming out, you're like, no.
They call that the podcast for me.
Anyways, in Knoxville, Tennessee, we met kind of in the church planting world, and then he had this crazy idea to really revolutionize the approach that we have towards discipleship, and he started this small business called the Kairos Network, and he developed some amazing discipleship tools and resources that we use in our church plant, and the more I've gotten to know him, the more I'm just like, this dude is an amazing, not just entrepreneur, not just a man of God, but he's an awesome dad, and I just wanted to get him on to kind of share his story a little bit about that. And so, Matt, for you, what was the first blockbuster summertime movie that you remember going to?
Oh man, I don't remember which the first one was. I remember doing that all the time though. But of course, like the Batman series was big. Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
Ninja Turtles. Wow, I forgot about that.
The thing I can't get out of my head, and if you skipped the intro of this podcast, you're gonna have to go back and hear it. You were talking about your mom watching soap operas. You guys want to hear something crazy and kind of funny?
Was your mom into soap opera?
Yeah. So my dad, he's like, my dad is like my picture of what it means to be a man. Right.
Okay.
He was a Division I football player for University of South Carolina in the 70s. Yeah. And he's so humble. He would never tell me stories about it. Like I would have to get him around his brothers to hear his good football stories because he's super humble. But one of the things he told us was in college, this early 70s, the South Carolina football team used to, in the middle of the day, take a break to watch Days of Our Lives.
That's amazing.
That is fantastic.
So just imagine this group of just hardcore football players get on a field. They will take your head off. But in the middle of the afternoon, they're watching Days of Our Lives.
Days of Our Lives. I love it.
Dude, and some of those storylines, like back in the day, were like someone got possessed for a while. I mean, it was off the charts.
Insane. Yeah. Wow.
How times have changed.
Nothing inspires you like Days of Our Lives.
No.
Now, guys, go out there and
That's right.
Anyways, Matt, our heart in this is, man, to help guys wake up, gear up, and come alive.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned it before, just the love and the passion that you have with your dad. And we'll get into the Kairos Network, but I'd love to start there if you're comfortable with it. Like, tell me about your dad, and what was that like growing up with him? What were some of the things he did right? What were some of the things he did wrong? What are some of the things that maybe you, as you are now dad, have a chance to I want to do that for my kids. And what does that look like?
Yeah, on the did wrong side, you'd probably have to ask him what he perceives he did wrong. Like, because for me, he was just a great dad. He was a picture of what it looks like to live with character, to sacrifice for your family. He was a picture of like my work ethic springs from watching him work. He was a 7 to 7 kind of guy. Hardworking, and then when he was home, he was engaged with us.
That's huge.
And I got the opportunity to watch him like thrive in his career, and then go through really challenging moments in his career, and to see how he led his family through that. I got to watch as he grew in his faith, and then brought me along as well. And so, just a lot of sweet moments with him. And now it's crazy. When you go into ministry, you figure you'll get thrown anywhere, right?
Right.
And I'll definitely share more of that story. But one of the crazy things now is I'm in this season I would have never expected, where I literally live 5 minutes down the road from my dad and mom and my brothers.
That's cool.
Dude, that's amazing.
Our kids are in the same school district. My son will go to middle school with my niece next year. My middle son got to play flag football with my nephew for a game because they needed somebody to jump in. And I'm watching him. My brother calls me up spur of the moment, right? And he's like, "Hey, is Sammy able to jump into this game?" And he's playing with kids around his age, but they're a year ahead of him in school. And so I watched him play flag football with my nephew, and I watched my nephew and my son score all the touchdowns.
That's cool.
Throwing long bombs to my son, and it was just like I was just like, videoing this. So it's like
Dad moment.
In the midst of life, and you'll understand more of that story. Like God put us in this like crazy season where I get to be around my dad and my brother in the same town, like doing ministry, but like getting to just also have that family side of life. So like really in that sense, I feel really spoiled because now my kids get to know my dad more as well, which is so cool.
And knowing part of your story, while you feel spoiled, I know that was a huge risk for you and your wife to move from the East Coast to
Central America.
Right?
To Central America, yeah.
I promise you, if you were in house, I'd ask you to punch him right now. I'd ask you to just haul off. That's bro code. Like you go there, I'm going to punch you in your face. That's so inappropriate. Anyways, you had mentioned.
Sorry,
no,
I broke the mood.
No, but you did mention your dad 7 to 7. When he came home, he was able to focus in and invest. One of the things that I'm intrigued with, because you are very technically savvy, and with the advent of learning how to do our vocation with technology so readily available, how do you navigate the cell phone and the small business and managing that time of like, hey, I'm working. Or manage at the time, I'm putting it all away and just focusing it on your kid. Because I think that's a tension a lot of dads have because we are always at work because of our phones and because of our computers. Well, and we can work all the time.
No, I love that. And even that, like that idea that like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, why am I watching my phone? Like it literally almost happens like inadvertently. So I'd love to hear some wisdom about that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked because I do it perfectly. I never mess up on that side. No, I think
Matt
like all of us,
Peeples.
You got to cut yourself a break. And one of the reasons you have to cut yourself a break is like we forget that we are living through a grand experiment. Like it's not just our kids that are trying to figure out technology. And each decade that gets a little bit more complex with raising kids and when they get phones and when they don't and all that kind of, we're navigating that now. But I think we're forgetting that like the iPhone, and all its connectivity, it didn't release till 2007. Right. So that's not even 20 years ago yet. And so like we're learning how to navigate a culture in which you can be plugged in 24/7, but we've forgotten we're not 24/7 people. And so I think through making some mistakes, through having to kind of learn through the seasons, a couple of things that I've learned that have been really helpful for me is I create some boundaries. One natural boundary is a Sabbath. You will find I'm a big believer in the importance of a Sabbath. And one of the reasons I'm a big believer in the importance of a Sabbath is, thanks to Dr. Dale Meyer and him talking to us about that in seminary and then me actually trying it. And then also, not doing it for a little bit, that always helps as well.
Right.
But what that Sabbath does is it creates some healthy limits and boundaries. Because in ministry, just like in anything in life, it's really easy to just blur the lines and have no boundaries. And usually when you have no boundaries around those things, the people that get hurt first are the people that are closest to you.
So real quick, before you go on, the Sabbath language is language that I'm very familiar with and Bill's very familiar with, but I know there's probably some guys that may not be familiar with that language. Can you unpack that? Like, when you say Sabbath and what do you mean by that and where did that come from and kind of tell us the story of that?
Yeah. So scripturally, the Sabbath came from like the story of creation, right? You've got God and he created for 6 days. And on the seventh day, it says he rested. Well, what's really interesting about that is the last day is the day man was created. And so the first thing man does is he rests. And so there's this theology throughout the Old Testament of, we were not created simply to work, right? But that our work actually comes from our rest. So if you look at the Hebrew day didn't begin with the morning, it began in the evening. So you actually started your day with rest, and then you ended your day with work. So your work came out of your rest. On the same standpoint, the beginning of the week was the Sabbath, right? And so the Sabbath was a day where you put your normal work aside, and you were just invited to pour into relationship, into family, into things you enjoy. Now it got super legalistic as you read scripture, and Jesus really had to push back against that. Yeah, surprising. But the thing is, we've sometimes forgotten, because we say, oh, that's that 10 Commandments stuff, right?
Yeah.
We forget, one, that the Sabbath is one of the 10 Commandments.
Right.
And the same way I wouldn't encourage somebody that it's okay to murder, I shouldn't encourage that it's okay to just neglect that Sabbath. But when we neglect the Sabbath, the first person we hurt is ourselves. And we rob ourselves of the opportunity to rest, which reminds us that the world will keep spinning even if we're not working. And I think when we overwork, we have this tendency to think that it all rests on us, which is a burden we weren't really meant to carry.
Right.
And so when we actually take time to rest, it not only refreshes us, but it reminds us God's in control. And then it allows us to pour into our relationships and our family. But then it also allows you to work harder in those 6 days because you have some of those limits. So for me, Sabbath was huge. And then what I started doing on my Sabbath, and this has been in the last couple years, is I started putting a vacation filter on my phone.
Oh.
So literally on my Sabbath, the only people that can get a hold of me through the vacation filter are my family and any close friends that aren't on that vacation filter. I refuse to let myself work on my Sabbath, even if I'm a little behind on something. And that's a little bit of legalism on my part. But what I found is it allows me to rest. It allows me to reset. It allows me a chance to pour into my marriage, my family, and create some of those healthy boundaries. And then what I've had to just start doing is like having a charger for my phone somewhere else where I can just, and then being intentional. Now I say that, and if my wife's watching this, she knows that sometimes I'm with it.
Yeah.
But really, really trying to, something new I'm experimenting with is there's a little focus filter on there. So like if I jump on Instagram, it's like you get to jump on Instagram 5 times. It's like, and if I try to jump on that 6th time, it's like, are you sure? You have to actually search it out to find it. But trying to really engage with my kids.
Wow.
And then they're just at an age where like I'm trying to do stuff with them.
Yeah. How old are your kids right now?
My boys, my son is going to turn 12 this June. My middle son is 10 and my youngest son is 8.
Crucial ages, man.
Are they all gingers?
No. Actually, the funny thing is, if you look at my nieces and my nephew, they all, the red hair, if you look at my kids, we literally tested the depths and breadths of our gene pool.
Yes.
So like my youngest son and my older son, they've got a little fairer skin, but they'll get a tan, which I'm still so jealous of.
I know, I get it.
Son, I call the tan biscuit because he's like super dark tan like my wife. He looks like my wife, with my muscle build. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, we live in what I lovingly call just a little fraternity house, and it is all boy. I mean, and they love doing sports, so we'll do workouts together. In the garage gym. My middle son loves concerts and camping, so we've gone camping. I've taken them to like a concert. I just try to do some stuff with them, and some stuff that I know they enjoy, and that really came from, kind of hearing from people in the past. It's like, one, you want to pour into your kids while they want you to be there.
Yes. Yes.
And then when they don't, they might still want to hang out with you.
Yeah.
When they don't have to be there. But the other thing was, I really try to be interested in the things they're interested in.
We just did a podcast about that.
We just finished a podcast on that one. That's awesome.
And I got to be honest, I'm a little spoiled in some of that sense because, like, yesterday my middle son was sick, and so he's like, "Hey, Dad, can we play some video games together? I'm like, yeah, we ended up playing old school Double Dragon 2.
I can
Like,
still remember
yeah,
the theme music from that. That's
yes.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
You can punch, you can kick, you can jump. That's what you know.
Yep.
And we just sat there having a blast doing that together.
On a sick day. That's a great way. And I love, because what we talked about is intentionally creating moments with your kids, particularly during summertime, to create those memories. Because memories aren't from the routine. Memories are from breaking the routine. Yeah. And that's what you did with your son. I think that's fantastic. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about like your journey? I know you graduated from seminary, went on church planting, and then you started this Kairos Network. To kind of talk us about God stirring in you, how he got you there. What were some of the hurdles that you and your wife had to talk through and overcome to finally step out? Because there's so many guys that I think God has put something on their heart to do, but the fear and the hurdles they think are so insurmountable that it keeps them stagnant rather than moving forward with that. So share with us a little bit of that story too.
Yeah, two things really stick out. One, I'm a church planter. A lot of people look at me like a church planter, but I never thought I could be one. And I think sometimes God calls you into things that you think you can't do, so that you're more dependent on him. And that's really what my church planting journey was. But once I got into it, I got a chance to work with one of my mentors, Greg Burst, in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I just got to see crazy cool things happen as I was training for church planting. And then I went and planted a church in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I could have done that the rest of my time as a pastor. We got to have a church where we were really at the time hard targeting 24 to 34-year-old males disconnected from church, even though we didn't put that on the billboard. And so I would go out anywhere there was a 24 to 34-year-old male. So we did stuff at brew festivals. I was the inaugural member of a cigar shop at one point. We did worship in a movie theater. We would let people text in questions, and we just started seeing people 10, 20 years disconnected from faith coming out to church. And it was through that experience that I realized, man, one of the reasons I was able to plant is because somebody poured into me. And so that gave me a desire to start pouring into other people. So we turned that church plant into a training center, and we started training guys to plant who've gone out and planted places now. And through that process, God kind of called us up to try something different. And it was to go up to New Jersey and take over a 100-year-old church. So to try the other end of the spectrum and to do a little bit of revitalization and then train people how to church plant up there. And it was an incredible experience, but it was also just a really challenging experience.
Yep. Yeah, the frozen chosen, man. The frozen chosen up there.
Some of the people were amazing, and I got to meet some really great people, and I got really deeply connected with a lot of people outside the church who had no connection to Jesus. And it was through that, and it was through living in the most post-Christian area of the country that I learned you can't just open up the doors to a church and people are going to come out.
Right.
You have to pour into your most untapped resource, which is the average everyday Christian who's going to places and spaces you can't go. And so I started saying, what would it look like if we took the intentionality that we had in training church planters and we applied that to average everyday Christians? And we didn't do one or the other, we did both. And that's kind of where the missionary pathway was born, but it was also born out of, I like to say, one of my mentors says, sometimes pain is the catalyst for your calling. And I was in a church that was kind of it was a 100-year-old church. And revitalization, I'm not going to say it was all of the church. Revitalization for a church planter is not really necessarily our skill set, even though you use a lot of the same tools. The application is different, and that just was not where my heart was to sit and to try to get a church to move forward that didn't want to move forward in that direction. Maybe thought they did, but experienced some of that stuff, and it just wasn't what they were looking for. And then I was starting to kind of wrestle with the pain of I've had this church planting experience where we were in this highly missional context, doing anything to reach lost people. And now I'm in this context where it feels like anything we do to reach lost people, there's always a hurdle. And I was like, it kind of started feeling like country club church. And I didn't want my kids to grow up in that. There were great people, but there was just some unhealthy systems at play there.
No, I love that. Sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off. I love what you're saying, because I think there's a lot of pastors that we run into. We do a lot with pastoral ministry as well.
And caring for the pastors.
Caring for pastors. That's part of what we do with Known Legacy, is work with guys who are incredible men of God. But, man, they have hit themselves against the wall. So what were some benchmarks for you that we could share with those guys that were like, hey, because most pastors are not quitters. Like we're kind of entrepreneurial at spirit. We see potential in people.
Right.
But what is some wisdom you would share with those guys that's like, hey, if you're hitting your head against the wall, here's some fleeces to put out, as you're walking through this that may say it's time to move on.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I really wrestled with that. I wrestled with that a lot because I'm also, like you say, I'm not a quitter. I tend to work hard and pour myself in. I'm on the back end of that. I'm really thankful for that challenging experience in ministry and probably a ministry that just wasn't a right fit for me, to be honest with you. And I'm thankful for that experience because I learned that the challenges you face in ministry, it's not necessarily a talent issue. Okay. So it's not because you're not gifted or you're not equipped. And I think sometimes in culture, we get this sense of like, well, if you were a better pastor, if you were gifted, if you were more gifted, more equipped, that's not true. It's not true in scripture. It's not true in ministry. So it gave me a lot stronger empathy for people that are walking through hard situations in ministry.
Right.
To not say, well, it might not be that person at all. They might be faithful and doing exactly what God called them to do. And what God called them to do was sit through a really hard season. There's stuff we're doing today that had I not had that experience, had I not gotten to walk with people in that context, in the good and in the frustrating, I would not have been able to do what we're doing with Missionary Pathway and with the Kairos Network. But as we were doing that, one thing that stuck out to me was like, is this what I want my kids to think church is?
Ooh.
In the sense of like, do I want my kids to grow up thinking church was dad's job and like it didn't align with the gifts he was given and the passions he had. And so that for me was a big bar. It's like, do I want my kids to grow up in this? The other thing was just realizing, and this, I don't know the right way to say it, but so forgive me. But one of the other things that was really tough for me was I was like, I'm doing what 90% of pastors can do, and I'm not doing the 10% thing that I'm uniquely gifted to do.
That's a huge insight.
Yeah.
And so it's not even that like the pastor that's there now is amazing, and there's amazing people at that church that are just still, such great people. But like, it wasn't a right fit for my gifts, as far as like how I was wired to do ministry and my philosophy of ministry, and the fact that like I was living in this context where we weren't changing, but I was deeply connected with people outside the church, and it was like I didn't feel that burden for people outside the church. And so there wasn't as much of a missional alignment. It was more of like an organizational survival alignment in some sense.
Right.
And that was my perception. So I'm not saying somebody from the church would go, I care about lost people. They definitely do. But like some of the things that we decided to do, that we were trying to change, it was just like, there's so much opposition against it. And yet there wasn't that sense of urgency. And then, all of that really started to just weigh very heavily on me. My wife could see it. My family could see it. And it was just kind of this burden of like, I can't keep doing this. I think for me, the hardest part was, I finally took a vacation. Like,
the fact that you use the word finally, I think
Yeah.
resonates with
Kind
a
of
lot
sets
of
the
dudes.
benchmark.
Yeah,
Right there.
yeah.
And you got to understand too, and like this is the other. I totally forgot to give this piece of context, so I apologize. We were making great traction, and then COVID hit, and COVID in New Jersey was different than most areas of the country. It was an epicenter, and so imagine a place where you're used to hearing trains and watching buses go by all the time, and then transit just stops. And in that moment, my family had gone out of town on a trip to see my in-laws in Florida, and it just didn't line up for me. I had gone to a conference earlier and I came back. And so it was like the world shut down. And I told my family, I was like, do not come back right now.
Right.
Stay where you're at. And And I used that opportunity. That's really what started growing our network. Was I was like, okay, our church is positioned to be fine. Like we already had live streaming and all that stuff. So like for us, COVID could have just been an email, but I really had a burden for all those other churches out there that like they were going to try and figure out what I took years figuring out in a weekend. And they were going to have to try and learn how to do online ministry stuff. And so I called a couple buddies and we did just a webinar to help people learn how to do church online. And all of a sudden our email list went from like 30 people to 500 plus in 2 weeks.
Wow.
The guys that did that first webinar agreed to it and jumped on it in less than 24 hours. Just poured some great stuff in. And so we started doing things to help people navigate COVID. So in a season where I could have like sat back and kind of rested and just led at our church, I was leading at our church and I was also trying to help the church abroad. And I think just the full exhaustion of that when we were stepping out of COVID and I started trying to move us forward in that vision direction we were already moving, things had changed and the church wasn't ready to go in that direction anymore.
Yep.
And so there was a lot of painful stuff that happened in that process. And so in that process, my wife, who had stayed home for 9 years, had started working again. Okay. And so we just kind of looked and it was like, we had talked about doing the Kairos Network thing more full time, where we were pouring into the training everyday, missionaries, church planners. And we looked and we're like, well, we can just take another call. But there was a big kind of fear that, hey, this would just happen again,
Yeah.
Or we could step out and do something we had never done. We had started things, but we had never started something from the ground up with no funding or support. And so we made a hard decision together as a family that we felt God was calling us into that. And so I left my full-time paying job and my benefits. So I held the insurance for the family. We went on my wife's insurance for work, and we cut out probably 2/3 of our salary.
Wow.
And then we were living in a parsonage. So a part of that was like, if we do this and you're no longer at the church that has your house, you got to move. And so that sparked the first move. We moved down to Florida near some families so that we could start launching this out. And we started launching it out from the ground up. And let me tell you, it was not easy. There were a lot of moments where it's like, it's one thing to plant something when you're in your mid-20s and you don't have any kids, and you just get married. It's another thing to realize that the risky journey you feel God calling you on, you're bringing the whole family with you.
Yeah.
And they don't get a choice in that, but it's going to be for everybody's best.
So talk to us a little bit, because you've used the language missional pathways a few times, and I think that's one of the tools that you've developed and you have accessible online. So the question is, let's say there's a guy listening right now that he's like, man, the fire's kind of burning in his heart, that there's something God's put on his heart, and he's for too long delayed it and had the excuses, and it's just like, I got to get after it. Tell us a little bit about Missional Pathway and how that might be a tool for them to tap into to be able to get some of the training and some of the stories that will encourage them to overcome the fear and actually engage in the unique vision and mission that God's called them to.
Absolutely. So Missionary Pathway is a free training we put online. And here's the crazy part with the training. My buddy Trey, also a church planner, co-created that with me through the network. And when we were creating that, remember, I'm making zero salary, right? So I'm thinking this is the thing that's going to help us generate some income and be able to make this network thing happen. And then my buddy Trey looks at me and he goes, we need to make this training free because we don't want to put a lid on discipleship. And I was like, Trey, I hate you. But
if you know Trey, right. Everyone has that moment. You're like, man, I hate you because you speak truth. And that's not good truth.
And the reason we kind of came to that, he came to that, and then I came around, was because the Missionary Pathway is essentially a simple training that is designed in a way that the average everyday Christian can learn how to share the gospel in the places they're already going. Yes. So like we talk about the Great Commission, go and make disciples, right? But it's actually as you are going. And so it's all our call, but we preach on it. We teach on it. The reality is 7 out of 10 Christians in your congregation have never been taught any method to share their faith.
Right.
And that includes the clergy.
Yep.
And so if you were to pull away the pulpit and you were to pull away the Bible study class, the reason we're not really able to train people is because we don't know how to do that.
Right.
And so the missionary pathway was really simply designed to teach somebody how to make a disciple in context where they're already going, by putting them in an environment where they're being discipled, and then giving them a process they could turn around and use to disciple somebody else to do the same thing.
That's awesome.
And since it's a free platform, when you do it, you could turn around and say, I love this. So like, for example, I had a retired woman, Karen, in our church here now. She started going through it, caught fire. She turned around and took 11 other retired women through it at church. I got a guy, Daniel, who's a fourth-year seminarian. He did it on his vicarage, took a bunch of people through his church through it, and then he started leading college students through it. And he didn't have to charge them a thing. He just gives them, and it gives you a really simple template that you can use to disciple somebody in how to share faith and how to make a disciple using just scripture and the Holy Spirit, where you're already going. So you could disciple somebody in a cigar shop. You could disciple somebody at a local bar, a coffee house, your school, your workplace, your home. And you learn how to do that. You learn how to be the church where you're going and to do the things Jesus called you to do.
Love it.
And yeah, so that's really what the missionary pathway is. But the crazy thing is the journey of launching it out really came as a painful calling, and what ended up happening was God started using it. And while he didn't provide for it the way I thought he would, the next thing I knew, we started getting some contracts to help train people. And then all of a sudden this thing that we were doing for free and moving around the country to try to figure out, all of a sudden God used it to start supporting our family. And so now we've got the network going. It's been a full-time job for a while. And now I'm leading as a lead pastor-elect at a church. And now my wife is our director of operations. So I'm able to do the network and the local church thing. So this thing that wasn't even generating income is now, the nonprofit that's part of supporting our family, and then allowing us to help people learn how to share Jesus where they're already going.
I love it because it's a story of stepping out and trusting God and God providing in amazing, crazy ways. Before we go to our final question, by the way, we're going to have you back on again, Matt.
Yes, we need to have you.
This has been fantastic.
I feel like we only started scraping the surface of this.
Yes.
We didn't talk about the dad thing or anything. This is great.
This is great. Real quick, how can they? Let's say someone's listening and goes, "Man, I want to go through that missional pathways." Where do they go?
Yeah, so if you go to the kairosnetwork.com. The kairosnetwork.com. If that's too hard to spell, just go missionarypathway.org.
And we will put your link in the bio too. So yeah,
I love that every time you talk about putting your link.
I know, it's right down here. Just hit it up on YouTube, and it's right there below it.
Yeah, you can get connected with that training. Also, you can. We have other trainings that work just like it that you can use to disciple people around you. We have a journal resource that you can use to disciple somebody through the Gospels. And so a lot of that stuff, our online stuff, is free, most of it. And then if you need to get connected with the training, it's not crazy costly.
Matt, you have been a breath of fresh air, and I appreciate you and your willingness to follow God wherever he goes. And without further ado, let us get into our Fast Five.
Our Fast Five. There it is. There it is.
Everyone laughs at it, but it is the cheesiest thing we do. But I love it. I love it. So
I know you love it. You love it. You do love it.
Bill, go for it.
Matt, who do you most admire and why?
Oh, man. I've got about 3 pastors and ministry leaders that I most admire, on top of my dad. So my dad wasn't a pastor, by the way. Pastor Joel Christensen just taught me what it is to be a pastor and has always been a mentor and friend. David Putman has been just a missional brother. He's been a coach in seasons, a mentor in seasons, and it's just taught me what it was to church plant and to be into disciple making. Mac Lake taught me what it is to be humble and to develop leadership pipelines and things like that. My friend Greg Burse, just an incredible mentor and friend.
Yes, he is.
And I got to learn from and see the Greg, where some people get to see the Greg that's the pastor and the leader. I got to see the Greg that's the pastor and the leader and the husband and the father.
Yep.
And what it's like to really balance those two things. So those are some guys that spring to mind.
Awesome. Great. Some awesome shout outs there. So
absolutely.
Man, where would you like to go on a vacation with your family?
We're going up to the Catskill Mountains, man.
Ooh,
we're going to camp out there. It's amazing. Yeah, we love
Whereabouts
that
in the Catskills? I'm from upstate New York, so whereabouts in the
Are
Catskills?
you serious?
Yeah,
okay,
I'm from Albany, Schenectady area.
In that tough little season, we had a little place in Denning and Grahamsville, literally in the center of the Catskill Mountains, and we're actually going to go camp in one of our favorite spots, Livingston Manor.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. So like upstate New York, but lower New York. For those that
my
don't
father's
know,
from Greenville, so yeah.
Anything outside the city is upstate New York.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's just upstate. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, apple orchards and apple cider donuts. There we go.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord. That's good stuff.
So good.
Awesome. Okay, so what are you currently reading, whether a Bible or another book?
Definitely the Bible is a good one. I actually just read Tyler Staton's new book, The Familiar Stranger. And if you want a book that digs into the Holy Spirit, without making it weird, but also not stealing the power of the Spirit,
That's cool.
That's an incredible book. I really
Familiar Stranger.
Yeah, The Familiar Stranger.
Okay,
excellent.
Check it out. What's a goal you have for this year?
So, like I said, I just became the lead pastor-elect of a church here, and we're doing the network. So as far as my goal setting goes, it's just more about doing those two things well and making sure there's that healthy balance. Cool. So like other goals, I didn't really set as many this year. So I'm not going to try and run a marathon or anything. I'm just
that sounds like enough, actually. So
yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
That's awesome. All right, number 5. What's the most impactful piece of advice you've ever been given?
I'm going to go to something. There's been a few. I'm going to go to something that my mentor Greg said. He said, people will overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 5.
Oh, so good. So good.
Absolutely.
Matt, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being on today. We've been blessed to have you on. I know we'll have you on again.
Absolutely.
We need to. Man, guys, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you share, like this, and subscribe. Check us out, info@knownlegacy.org.
Yep.
Check us out on all the Instagram and the Facebook, all those things.
Don't forget, we have a Known Legacy retreat coming up in the fall.
Men's retreat.
Man, we have an early bird registration right now that's live, and we encourage you to sign up for that. Wives, women, it's a great Father's Day gift.
Yes, yes.
Give them a few days away just to be encouraged and figure out what it is to be more than you.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, guys, thanks so much for listening today. Our goal is to help you wake up, gear up, and come alive. Matt, you've been a blessing, and I know we'll have you on again. Thank you for what you do. Check out Matt's stuff. We'll have the link in the bio down there.
In the bio.
Or up there or over on the side or somewhere. But check it out, Kairos Network. And so excited. Thank you for your faithfulness. Man, grateful. Any last comments or thoughts from you?
Man, thanks for having me. I love this podcast, this concept, and if you're feeling like God's calling you somewhere, like, take the leap, because it's one of the best things you can do for your family as a whole.
Love it. God bless you guys. Have a great week.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to the Known Legacy podcast. We'd love to hear from you, so email us your questions or comments to info@knownlegacy.org.